Welcome, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. Say hi while we're getting everything started, and drop your name and where you're calling from in the chat. I want to flag that this is an educational call. It is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. Again, captions will be on Facebook. So if you do need captions for accessibility, please check Facebook. This is a webinar. For Q&A, you would want to ask questions in the chat and we will capture as many as we can. So welcome back again. Unlike our mass calls, this will be a conversation between our speakers, working to make connections between what is happening in the US and what is happening across the globe. I'll intro your moderator who will facilitate the discussion, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. While these organizations all have ways for you to take action, the purpose of these sessions is for us to be in collective study about where we've been and where we are now, so that we can vision together a free feminist future for all of us. We invite you to listen, to take notes, to discuss, and afterwards to check out the readings that you'll receive in your follow-up email. I'm going to go ahead and drop in our working agreements in the chat. Please be sure to be appropriate in the chat. We will be watching, and any spam, which is repeated posting the same content or trollish behavior, will result in you being removed from the conversation. And we know you all want to be a part of this, so please stay on that best behavior. And I will go ahead and introduce right now Tamika Middleton. Are you going to pop up there, Tamika?
Here I am.
Awesome.
Welcome, y'all. I'm going to thank you, Shauna, so much. Shauna, who is I don't know if Shauna introduced herself. Shauna is our national distributor organizer at Women's March. Any of you who have been doing any distributed actions with us over the past several months has met Shauna. Any of you who are in Pantsuit Nation are familiar with Shauna because Shauna moderates our Pantsuit Nation group. And Shauna is a longtime Women's March writer, has been on the team in the building with us for many years. Before I got here, Shauna was here. And so so we are very grateful to have Shauna. I'm just dropping this link and you can see it on the bottom. If you didn't see it in the chat, here is the link for the working agreements. Please do check those out. We love y'all, Women's Marchers. And also, one of my favorite things and one of my favorite agreements that I ever learned was this agreement that says oppression exists, but we challenge it here. And so we're going to invite you to be mindful that, yes, we live in the muck of racialized, gendered, oppression based on sexuality, oppression, xenophobia, all of those things, right? And in this space, we are challenging oppression, okay? Every day, every time. And when it arises, we have space for growth and an invitation to growth, but also a standard and a mandate about respect, okay? So I didn't even introduce myself yet. I'm going to thank you, Shauna. I'm going to move you off stage so you can get in your bag on the tech side. So hey, everybody. Welcome, good friends. I am so grateful to see all of you from so many different places. And I know, as is the norm, people will continue joining. If you just got a text message, thank y'all for being so responsive to your text messages. If you already knew this was coming, or if you were just browsing on your Facebook or your Instagram, you got a notification, or your YouTube, and you said, let me get into it. I appreciate y'all for joining. My name is Tamika Middleton. I am Managing Director. Also, I have to change that. I am currently, my new title is Chief Political and Strategy Officer at Women's March. And I'm so grateful to be with y'all. Many of you have seen me, even with my new hair. You might recognize me from some of our other mass calls, from some of our actions. But I have 4 years in the field with all of you, and it has been a joyous time. And I'm so grateful to be able to organize with y'all. I see y'all dropping in the chat where you are from. Shout out to a number of y'all in California. Like, there's a good bit of West Coast folks on here, and I'm super excited about that. Some California, we have some Washington State, Arizona. Shout out to our Texans. We know, Texas is its own little. I never know what to categorize y'all. Some parts of it feel like the Southeast, like me. Some parts feel like the Southwest. So we'll just say Texas. Much love to our Midwestern folks in Minnesota. We have multiple Minnesota folks, all of our upstate New York, Pennsylvania, so all those East Coast folks. And then my loves down here with me in the South. I see a neighbor in Atlanta. I see some Virginia folks. Yes, Boston, Madison. We love Madison. We just left Madison about 2 weeks ago, maybe, not even. And I see some folks already saying they can't stay for the whole duration. Understandable. The videos will live on our YouTube and on our Facebook. All right. So I'm going to jump in and get us started. And I will make a note that if you have questions as we move through the conversation, feel free to drop them in the chat. Shauna will be watching, monitoring, adding things, saving things for us, so that when we get to the Q&A section, we will be able to get into it and to answer as many of your questions as possible. So feel free to drop your questions in the comment section. All right. So again, welcome. This is the first of these calls that we are doing, of this kind of call that we are doing so far. This is our first Free America Study session. Now, many of you have seen on our socials, on our website, in our email, that we are moving a campaign we're calling Free America, and a Free America Weekend of Action in particular. And what we are really trying to be in conversation about here is sort of a little bit of play on words, right? What does a free America look like? And also, what does it require for us to free America in the verb sense, right? And so we want to talk some with each other, be in conversation about how we lean into the promise of freedom that this country offers, this country has espoused. How do we both lean into it and hold it accountable to that promise? And so we have invited you all out on 4th of July weekend to do actions across the country, whatever that action may be. Maybe it's a community event. Maybe it's a barbecue, and you bring in your friends and y'all are talking about freedom together. Y'all are grappling with these concepts. Or maybe you're joining a 4th of July parade as a contingent to push this conversation forward, to talk about, in the face of fascism, what does freedom look like and what does freedom require? And so that's what we're inviting you all into on the 4th of July weekend. But leading up to that weekend, we wanted to give us some opportunities to be in conversations together about this question, and to really start grappling with some texts, some readings, and to really be in study. One of the things that I learned from the social movement legacies that I stand inside of is that collective study is a vital part of our movements and of us being at our best inside of this movement work. And so we want to invite you into collective study. And so we'll have these sessions, we'll have some conversations, we'll introduce some topics. Hopefully you'll learn some things, invite you to take some notes. Hopefully it'll generate some questions for you, some conversations you can take back into your communities. And then you'll have the readings on the other side that you can really plug into and really dig into and grapple with, and hopefully grow your politics so that you can grow your understanding of the world that we're in. One of the things that one of my political homes, BOLD, Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity, teaches us about, understanding our dimension of time, our past, our present, our future, our back, our middle, and our front. And so we want to really be understanding what our past is, what we have collectively at our back, what we are understanding as happening in our landscape currently, and then also what is the future that we are trying to build together, and what do we need to take from the past and the present in order to build that future. All right, so with that, this session, we pulled together this week because we really felt like it was important to grapple with a bit this conversation around war and genocide in this moment, especially coming out of this weekend. And so we brought together some phenomenal speakers, and we're so grateful for them. This is like the ask came, days in advance of this session, and they agreed and so graciously, and I'm so excited about that. But what we want to be in today is, what does freedom look like, and what does freedom require in times of war and genocide? What is it up to us as freedom fighters to do and to be in? What actions we need to take when we are trying to build towards freedom in the face of war and genocide? And so I am going to bring in our speakers. I'm going to do some brief introductions. Welcome. Oh, wait, hold on. There we go. So I'm going to do some brief introductions of our speakers, and then they're going to tell us more about their work when they get on stage. But first, I want to introduce Aliyah El-Assar, who's a Palestinian American communications worker and the director of media organizing at Adala Justice Project. If you were with us at People's March, then you heard Adala from the main stage. Over the past decade, her work has primarily focused on Palestinian liberation and immigrant rights, having worked on campaigns on issues including ending the genocide and siege on Gaza, ending U.S. military funding to Israel, demilitarizing the U.S.-Mexico border, and expanding Medicaid coverage to undocumented communities, which, if you are paying attention to what is happening in the news right now, you know it's still a very present and vital issue to be working on. She is passionate about using communications and storytelling as a tool to build power and solidarity across movements to achieve collective liberation. So thank you so very much, Aliyah, for being here. Our second speaker is Miriam Sabaghi, who is the National Organizing Director at the National Iranian Council. She joined NIAC staff in June 2020. She is an experienced organizer with a strong commitment to gender, racial, economic, and social justice. One of Miriam's greatest passions is building relationships and moving people to direct, impactful action about issues they care about. Since taking the helm as organizing director, Miriam has helped grow NIAC's external relations, grassroots leadership, and multi-ethnic campaigns, as well as lead GOTV campaigns. Miriam is also a member of the Plowshares Fund Field Building Committee for 2024 to 2026. And so I want to ask y'all to please welcome Miriam. And also, if you came and joined us in DC for the Blue Wave, our Blue Wave action, which was, I want to say 2023, NIAC was on our stage then as well. And so, we're really trying to be in the business of building long-term ongoing relationships with organizations across the movement landscape and working on various issues. So I want to thank y'all so much, and I want to invite you all, maybe first Miriam and then Aliyah, to talk about what it is that your organization is up to, and then also in the countries of focus that you all have. Can you tell us some about what the current landscape is that you all are working inside of?
Thanks everybody. Thanks Women's March for having me. It's truly an honor to be here, and really grateful to be in community with you all. NIAC was founded in 2002. It's a civil rights organization, and also our mission is to promote peace and diplomacy between the United States and Iran. It was formed in 2002 after 9/11, because back then there was a lot of crackdowns against Muslims, Iranian Americans on their rights. So NIAC was formed back then to protect civil rights for all Iranian Americans and promote peace and diplomacy between the United States and Iran. Right now, we are working on a whole range of issues. So based on our mission statement, right, we are working right now, as you all may know, about the war between Israel and Iran, which currently we're in a ceasefire right now. But it's a very fragile ceasefire. And then, as you all may know, the United States did attack Iran's nuclear facilities on Saturday, which was done without congressional authorization. And so these are two nuclear armed countries that attacked a non-nuclear armed country. So that is something we're so closely monitoring the fragile ceasefire. Thousands of civilians have been reportedly killed in Iran. Officially it's 610, but the number is going to go up because of people trapped in the rubble and also unaccounted deaths. In Israel, we saw 27 Israelis killed by Iranian ballistic missiles. Israel did attack on June 13th, which was unprovoked. It was done without any provocation from Iran, and they struck the capital, Tehran, which is home to 9 million people, including my family. Generations of my family have lived in Tehran for many years, for generations, and so my family, my friend's family, my own close friends have been forced to evacuate the city, especially after Donald Trump announced on Twitter that Tehran must evacuate in all caps. Now, how can you evacuate a city of 9 million people? So our Iranian American community in these past 2 weeks have been trying to get in touch with our families, loved ones back home. The internet was in total blackout and shutdown over the last 2 weeks. It's slowly coming back on. I was able to speak with my cousin today. They're all traumatized, even though there's a fragile ceasefire in place. So we are closely monitoring the situation between Iran and Israel and the United States. And there are talks. Apparently, there will be CNN reported that Trump announced that there will be talks between the United States and Iran next week. I don't know how verified that is, because it is. I mean, even the Iranian foreign minister said tonight on national TV that there are no talks going to be pursued with the United States, given the recent U.S. strikes and Israeli strikes on Iran, on both civilian infrastructure, but also military and nuclear infrastructure. On that note, we're also NIAC is working on the Kane War Powers resolution, which goes back to President Trump's unauthorized strikes on Iran on Saturday. Now, this was done without congressional authorization. Senator Kane, a couple weeks ago, introduced the Iran War Powers resolution, much like he did in 2020, if you may recall, saying that the U.S. the president cannot strike Iran without prior congressional authorization. There was a similar Yemen War Powers resolution, if you know, that was done back in 2018, 2019. And there was an Iran War Powers resolution introduced in 2020. So we are currently trying to whip up support in the Senate for that. There will be a vote on it in the Senate tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern on a Friday. And we're seeing that there's growing bipartisan support for it. Even Republicans have stated support for it. Interestingly enough. So right now we are, in the last 2 weeks, our NIAC chapters have focused on mobilizing and organizing rallies and protests across the country, which you may have seen, right, in cities like San Francisco, Boston, and so forth. And a lot of our coalition partners have also organized these rallies, and we're grateful for our coalition partners who have co-led these rallies. We just had one in Boston today, even though there's a ceasefire in place. And also their polls have shown that Americans and Iranian Americans oppose U.S. involvement in a war with Iran and categorically oppose military action against Iran. I would say only 16% of Americans support military strikes against Iran, which says a lot. And 62% of Iranian Americans support a diplomatic negotiated solution to the deal. And this goes as well, a strong majority for Americans. Poll after poll shows this. YouGov has seen this. Brookings Institution had a similar poll that came out last week. So we are working on that, mobilizing support for the Iran War Powers resolution. And also NIAC has co-led and organized rallies, candlelight vigils across the country, opposing military action against Iran, but also whipping up support for the Kane War Powers resolution. On the civil rights side, if you may have seen the news, but there have been ICE raids against Iranians in Los Angeles and in New Orleans in particular. These are asylum seekers who sought refuge, asylum in the United States from persecution back in their home country. Now, this burst of raids and arrests have come soon after the ceasefire was announced this week on Tuesday. There was a whole scores of people were arrested today. Iranians were arrested today in Los Angeles. These are asylum seekers. These are people who maybe come from religious minorities in Iran, political asylum seekers. So a lot of the geopolitical tensions that we're seeing are now playing out here at home in the United States, with the compounding ICE arrests that have been happening across not only the Iranian community, but also the broader Latino and the BEMEMSA communities. So I just want to say, we've also, since day one, NIAC has called for a ceasefire in the Middle East since October 7th. So we, with coalition partners across the country, we've mobilized local and national actions in support of a ceasefire, in support of peace in the Middle East. So we've also seen how these geopolitical tensions have played out locally, not only on ICE raids, but also civil crackdowns on civil rights. Now, there has been a travel ban, which a lot of us have been distracted by this fire hose of news from the Trump administration. They're flooding the zone, right? Just right before Israel strikes on Iran and U.S. strikes on Iran, Trump declared a travel ban on people from Muslim majority countries, including Iran. So people in Iran have been banned from immigrating to the United States. They're being raided by ICE in their own communities. This is a major wake-up call, not only for our community, but for other communities across the country who are facing similar persecution. Sorry if that went too long, but I just wanted to give you all like a broad overview of what we're working on in the moment. It's a lot. It's a fire hose of issues.
Absolutely. I think across the country, I think that's sort of been the theme of 2025, is just sort of a fire hose of issues all around. Aaliyah, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. As Tamika mentioned, I work with an organization called the Adalat Justice Project, which is a US-based Palestinian and women-led advocacy organization that has been working towards the liberation of Palestinians and of all oppressed people and the end of US complicity in the Israeli apartheid regime that is oppressing Palestinians. And we do this through intersectional organizing, really leaning into our partnerships with folks in other movements, because we know this is all interconnected, and through cultural and divestment campaigns and political education, like what is happening right now. In terms of the current situation, we are, still witnessing an ongoing genocide in Gaza. It's really impossible to overstate the amount of devastation that is currently happening in Gaza and has been happening for nearly 2 years now. We know confirmed that at least more than 55,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli military in Gaza, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is new research that suggests more than 109,000 Palestinians have been killed, and this is just through direct deaths, and that would be about 5% of the pre-genocide population. And, for comparison's sake, that's about 17 million Americans if we applied it here. And just today, Israel murdered 72 Palestinians in Gaza. They're killing Palestinians as we speak. All of the infrastructure has been devastated. Israel has dropped an equivalent of 6 Hiroshima bombs on Gaza, which is an area the size of Las Vegas, but 3 times the amount of population. And this has just been completely devastating to the people, devastating to the infrastructure. We know that the health system has been ravaged. There are no more fully functioning hospitals in Gaza. And this has, forced doctors and medical providers to make really heartbreaking decisions about, who they can treat, who deserves anesthesia. And people, the amount of suffering is just unfathomable right now in Gaza. And right now we're also seeing Palestinians in Gaza, more than 2 million Palestinians being systematically starved and experiencing famine. And aid is not entering as it needs to be. And this has been consistent. And the current aid entering is being controlled by a group that is a joint Israeli and US venture that is led by mercenaries, and the aid distribution sites have become killing fields for Palestinians. More than 500 Palestinians have been killed while trying to seek aid in just the past month alone, which has left Palestinians not only starving, but fearful to even try to seek out aid. And, so for the past nearly 2 years, we have really pivoted to focusing on trying to end the genocide. And we know that we need a ceasefire, but we know that the only way that this is going to happen is through stopping arms to Israel. And we have seen what happens when Israel is allowed to act with impunity, like Miriam was saying about how we have seen these escalations into Iran. And these escalations have also been made possible by allowing Israel to not just continue its genocide, but the US has been actively supporting and funding this genocide. Since October 2023, the US has sent over 30 billion US taxpayer dollars in weapons to Israel to fund the genocide. So this is not, this is also a US genocide. This is something that we're paying for, which, beckons back to the question that Tamika was sharing of like, how is this even, us being free when our money is being used to kill families back in Gaza? And, everyone I know from Gaza, my father's family is from Gaza, and there's no one that hasn't been touched by this. There's no one who hasn't lost a family member or a loved one. And, right now we are continuing to push for a ceasefire, for a stop to arming Israel. There's also legislation in Congress, the Block the Bombs bill, which is legislation that would stop some of the most atrocious bombs and weapons that have been used in Gaza. And this is a historic bill because it is the first time that Congress has ever tried to proactively stop weapons to Israel. And I think that we're in an inflection point, but it's not happening fast enough. Every day we're seeing hundreds more Palestinians be killed, children that are starving. A friend of mine shared a story on social media that has really haunted me about a mother who survived a bombing, but her husband and her children did not survive. And this is, heartbreaking, but what is really anguishing about it is that they didn't die right away. She sat by them and she was speaking to them and watching them as their breathing began to slow and as they, slipped away. And I can't imagine, being this mother, being a daughter, being a sister, and seeing this happen to your family, seeing that you can hear them under the rubble, but you can't get to them because there aren't supplies. And this is every day for Palestinians in Gaza. And it's important to note too that it's not just Gaza. We're seeing a genocide that needs to urgently end in Gaza, but we're also seeing an expansion of the annexation in the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem by Israel. We're seeing the green lighting of, I believe 22 new settlements in the West Bank, which means stealing Palestinian land, stealing Palestinians' homes, displacing them. And since October 2023, nearly 1,000 Palestinians in the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem have been killed by the Israeli military and by settlers, which have been backed by the Israeli military. So we're also seeing this ethnic cleansing campaign intensify within the West Bank. And there hasn't been, as much coverage of this, and people are becoming, we've seen some less coverage in mainstream media generally of the genocide and a little bit of numbness. And we need to really, wake up and understand that this is an issue that's really impacting us here domestically and how we are using our resources that are funding this, impacting the region, as we are seeing that, one of the reasons why Iran was attacked is because of the support for Palestinians and the call to end the genocide, and how this is impacting us back here. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so much, Aaliyah. And yes, what's happening in Iran, and as Aaliyah said, that what's happening in Gaza and also extended to the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem. We see in the comments someone lifting up what's happening in Ukraine. I also want to lift up what's happening in the Sudan, what's happening in the Congo, what's happening in Haiti. Across the globe, there are conflicts and crises that are taking place. In no small part, the U.S. has made interventions on the side of supporting war and genocide, and it is really our work to push back and to call our government to task about how we uphold the banner of democracy, how we uphold the banner of liberty, of life, of equality across the globe. And so I just want to just take a breath, because that was a lot. So I want to give us a moment to just really breathe into the reality of the tragedy and the trauma that's taking place across the globe. One of the things I really wanted to bring up as I was thinking about this session and thinking about this conversation and thinking about freedom, one of the things that really sits with me as I move in this work and think about, in the face of fascism, is the reality of being a Black woman from the South, and not just from the South, but from the rural South, and in particular from the South Carolina Low Country, where, the first sort of shots of the Civil War broke out, right? And growing up in the rural South, the sort of the promise of freedom that this country has espoused has not always rung true. It has always rung a little bit hollow. Like, I am a person who has put this, into conversation, the Star Spangled Banner in conversation with Lift Every Voice and Sing, or the Star Spangled Banner in conversation with the second and third verses of the Star Spangled Banner. Have put, America the Beautiful in conversation with Nina Simone, Mississippi Goddamn, or Nina Simone, I Wish I Knew How It Feels to Be Free, right? And so and even put the Declaration of Independence in conversation for myself with Frederick Douglass's What is the 4th of July to a Slave, right? And so I think there's this conversation, this historical conversation about not just what's happening today, but this country really has a legacy of not standing on business when it comes to the question of freedom. One of the things I was looking at and sitting with was the Emancipation Proclamation, and Lincoln saying, encouraging people to, quote, take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we were highly resolved that those dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And so I would love to hear, we know where we are currently. I'm curious if you all can talk about what has been the legacy of U.S. intervention and relationship in Palestine, in Iran, that has led us to where we are, because we know it didn't just start. It didn't start this weekend. It didn't start on October 2023. It has been an ongoing work. And so I would love to hear if y'all can offer, maybe starting with Aaliyah, some of the sort of historical trajectory of what, of the U.S. waving the flag of freedom, and, what we say in the South, throwing a rock and hiding their hands.
Yeah, thank you, Tamika. I think, the United States has this kind of national mythology of being rooted in freedom and liberty. But we know that the reality of the foundation of the United States as a nation state is, rooted in genocide, is rooted in oppression, is rooted in exploitation. We see this from the genocide of the indigenous people here. We see this from the abduction and kidnapping of Africans and during the slave trade. And, the U.S. has really, exported this model of freedom. Not only is the U.S. meant to be, in theory, this beacon of freedom, but we question, who is really free? Who is this built off the backs of for, an elite class? And it's based on exploitation. And it also has charged itself with this duty to free the rest of the world, right? Through this imperialist project. And we've seen that many places, of course. And one of the places that we have seen this extension of imperialism is in Palestine, and is in the United States, special relationship with Israel, which has been one of the most consistent features of foreign policy for the past several decades, with bipartisan support. This has been consistently supported regardless of the political party that has been in power. And I think in this relationship, we really see the U.S. in some ways looking in a mirror when it looks at the state of Israel and the foundations in terms of the necessity, the premise of any, settler colonial project, which has come and people are present, is built upon, the subjugation of the indigenous populations, which, in this case are Palestinians, upon their erasure, upon their extermination. And this has a very similar history to the actual foundation of the United States, despite this, kind of mythology that we're looking at as like a country that has been founded in freedom. When we know many people, were never free and they're still not free here in the United States. And I think, it sees itself in this project of Israel, and it has, bolstered the state of Israel and its ethnic cleansing project of Palestinians in a way that has allowed Israel to act with impunity and with viciousness that clearly has, we see what this has devolved into for Palestinians as we're experiencing the genocide right now in Gaza and the escalation of the ethnic cleansing project in the West Bank as well. And we know that, the United States will premise these interventions or this support as a project in supporting freedom and supporting liberty and supporting democracy, like to frame Israel as like the only democracy in the Middle East. But, there's democracy and freedom can exist for all people when, a system is premised on the supremacy of one race or one ethnicity. And that's what we see in Israel. And what this has meant for Palestinians is a systematic denial of their freedoms, of rights, but allowed Israel to function under the guise of a democracy in a similar way that we have seen throughout the history of the United States. So it's really kind of an extension of this imperialist project of the United States. And every facet of Palestinian life is controlled by Israel. Currently, Palestinians live under an apartheid regime where, whether they can go to school or work, whether they can seek medical care, if they can see their families, if they can live with their families, who they can marry, if they have access to food and water, this is all controlled by the Israeli government. And in order to justify these projects, as we see in the United States and in Israel, there's a necessity to dehumanize the indigenous populations or the populations that it's working to subjugate, which, historically have been Black and Brown populations. And this has been the case in Palestine, clearly. And the US has consistently impeded Palestinian freedom through its policies, through its ongoing support for Israel, through, its military funding, which the United States, prior to the genocide and continuing, sends almost $4 billion of our taxpayer dollars to Israel every single year to fund its apartheid regime in Palestine. And, this is justified again by dehumanization that, this is the democracy, this is what's going to bring freedom to the region. And, like you were saying, Tamika, this really rings hollow because this has never been applied for Palestinians and many other populations. It's premised upon the idea that Palestinians don't also cherish these values of self-determination and of freedom, and, we're incapable, and that we don't even have the right to be alive, to live. And, I think like what has motivated US policy clearly has been strategic interests, and we see this guise of freedom and democracy, but really what it is trying to gain power, trying to gain control of resources. And, something that I think about kind of frequently is early on in the genocide, in the first few months, I was a part of several meetings with members of Congress asking for them to sign on to legislation that Representative Cori Bush had put forth, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. And, meetings with, Democrats, with so-called progressives, they would identify as progressives, they would say, well, we can't call for a ceasefire because what happens after? What is the political horizon for Gaza? We don't see a good political option. We have to have something in place. We have to know what comes next. We have to be a part of that. And, this is extremely dehumanizing and infantilizing towards the Palestinian population. And this concept that the United States has to be involved directly and has to decide the future. And this is clearly not, freedom for the Palestinian people. It is an imposition of your interests, and you are trying to dominate and control us. And it also beckons, like, is saving the lives of tens of thousands of Palestinians not reason enough for a ceasefire? Without having a full political solution, people can't be free if they're all dead. We need a ceasefire, and many of these people have since come on and called for a ceasefire. But these systems will do anything to really uphold these systems of subjugation and constantly be framing it under this guise of freedom, while stripping Palestinians and others of their rights. And we see that here in the United States too, of what's happening with folks like Mahmoud Khalil and with other students and Palestine activists that have consistently been stripped of their rights, that have been abducted off the streets, and are denying people their freedom of speech, all because we are challenging this system, this imperialist system, and United States complicity in the genocide and in the maintenance of this apartheid regime. And I know I spoke a lot. I will pause there.
Thank you so much, Aaliyah. Miriam, if you had anything you wanted to add, in particular as it relates to Iran, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, Aaliyah, very well, eloquently stated. Try to, compress 70 plus years of history into it's very hard, and I get it. In the case of Iran, look, like, it goes back to 1953 with the US CIA engineered coup of Mossadegh, who wanted to nationalize Iranian oil, but of course US and UK interest didn't want Iran to have its own independence over its own natural resources, and they engineered a coup against the democratically elected Prime Minister Mossadegh, and that led to the 1979 revolution, because people were very fed up and discontent with the Shah's rule, and we got in its place an autocratic regime which saw crackdowns of thousands of people over the last 30-40 years, and a lot of political freedoms were taken away. So I would say, the U.S. intervention in 1953 has been etched into the psyche of Iranians for why we are here today, much like 1947 for the Palestinian people. For us, it's 1953 with the U.S. engineered coup against Prime Minister Mossadegh. If the U.S. had not engineered that coup, if the CIA had not done it, we would have a very different Iran than what we have today. I just want to put it out there. And second of all, with the last 2 weeks of Israel's bombing of Iran, and we even on mainstream media like on CNN and so forth, there was a lot of narrative about freeing Iranian women. This goes back to Women Life Freedom in 2022, which Israel, I would say, pumped a lot of propaganda and money into the country. They invested in outlets like Iran International and so forth to put their talking pieces out there and trying to engineer an uprising against the government and basically they're not interested in a stable Iran, no matter what. They just want a collapse of the Iranian society and the government, no matter who is in power. That is their goal. And that was their stated goal ever since the beginning of this military campaign a couple weeks ago. They did say, this is not only about the Iranian nuclear program, this is about Iran itself. Now, in the last few years, we've seen a lot of these propaganda channels being fed on not only on social media, but also on TV, which Iranians have watched. And with the, that kind of actually hampered internal struggles for change within Iran, right? The Women Life Freedom movement was born organically within Iran. It is born organically from previous movements of struggle from homegrown Iranian activists, not outside activists, who want a better Iranian society, more freedoms, and better change in a better future. As soon as a lot of the propaganda and TV channels started kicking in, the movement died because people were not able to organize effectively as organically as they were able to with outside intervention. outside intervention these days is not just military coups. It is come in the form of propaganda TV channels who are fed these liberation lies, as Alia mentioned earlier, false narratives that are not homegrown and organic. Right now, I want to go back to the last couple of weeks where Israel did bomb hospitals, much like the playbook in Gaza. My own cousin, who's a doctor in Tehran, I had to be afraid whether or not she would be killed by Israel, much like how my Palestinian brothers and sisters have been fearing for their friends and their families, how their hospitals, their civilian residential buildings have been bombed. A civilian building was bombed 3 blocks away from my aunt, where she lives in Tehran. So I want to say that for the last couple of weeks, there has been a national rally around the flag effect, which the Israeli government was not hoping for. And I think this is partially why they wanted a ceasefire, because they saw that their propaganda machine was not working. People were not buying it in Iran. When they saw their hospitals being bombed by Israel, it was not just targeted surgical strikes as they were claiming. They were bombing residential buildings. Over 600 people have been officially killed. These are my friends, neighbors. They can be your sisters. They can be your brothers. These are people who were yoga instructors, people who were, hospital workers, Red Crescent Society workers. And I want to say also Israel bombed the Evin prison right before the ceasefire happened. And Evin prison is home to a lot of political prisoners, a lot of persecuted religious minorities. And a lot of these people were part of the Women Life Freedom movement in 2022. Now, Israel claimed that they wanted to bomb the prison in the name of freedom. Now, how can you bomb prison? I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but how can you bomb for the liberation of political prisoners when you're killing them? I just read a report today by Femina that many political prisoners were killed by that bombing of Evin prison. And now we don't know where these prisoners, a lot of the other political prisoners, are, because the government has ferried them off to undisclosed locations. Now, is this in the name of women life freedom? And a lot of the people who are cheering for the bombs don't know what women life freedom means. They don't know what that entails. They're cheering for the bombs in the name of women life freedom. And people in Iran, I've seen on social media, my own networks there, activists who are very involved, have unequivocally come out against Israel. They have been very critical against the government for decades. And on social media, they're posting, "I stand against Israel. I stand against America." This is the opposite effect that we're seeing. Now, the regime change, it is a fragile ceasefire is in place right now. A lot of Iranians do not trust the ceasefire that is in place. There is no trust in America. The little trust that has been left before has been shredded now, because 2 nuclear armed countries bombed a non-nuclear country. And now public opinion, from what I see in Iran, even people who are not religious, do want to pursue an independent path from negotiations. And that is, I am feared for the nuclear non-proliferation regime, that is the NPT that is in place, because other countries in the Middle East will now be empowered to pursue a bomb. So I would say it is unclear what the Israeli and American governments have in place, what plan in place they have for regime change. Their goal is to collapse Iranian society. It goes beyond that. And a lot of Iranians right now, there's a national rally to the flag effect. I don't know how successful any future regime change campaign will be, but whatever change must happen, it must happen within Iran, and it must be homegrown, not outside engineered.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be able to share this space with y'all. I want to jump into some of these questions, because I think you all saw my list of questions, and I think our commenters have also, are also grappling with some of these same questions. So I'd love to jump in a little bit, if we could. I first want to kind of build off of what Miriam was just bringing around the impact on women and on women's movements. Of course, this is Women's March, so we cannot not talk about that. So we have 2 questions that have come up in the comments, and I'm going to sort of give you both of them, and then would also love to hear, Aaliyah, sort of how, if we could apply that also to Palestine, what we see there. So the first question is, what kind of new Iran will the Iranian women expect without foreign publicity in Iran? So I would love, or foreign intervention, I imagine also as part of that. If you can talk some about what is possible for Iranian women and what are the sort of movements and steps that are being taken, and how that relates to this question around foreign intervention.
Really good question. I hope I can answer to the best of my ability. I can say a lot of political prisoners, Iranian civil society organizations have signed and publicly denounced Israel's strikes against Iran and the U.S. Strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. And a lot of these women, or a lot of these activists are women, including Narges Mohammadi, who was imprisoned in Evin prison and was released just shortly before Israel struck that prison. I do not know this question because of this rally around the flag effect, the government is now more empowered to do more crackdowns on civil society in the name of national security, much like we saw here in the United States right after 9/11. Lots of crackdowns on civil rights in the name of national security, right? Same effect I'm seeing happening there. Iran just today pulled out of the IAEA, just kicked out all of the IAEA inspectors from Iran. And I'm also hearing reports that Tehran, the capital, is much more securitized after the ceasefire. There's more military there's more checkpoints, more searches. And of course, we don't know the fate of these political prisoners who were ferried off to different locations. I do not know what the future will entail for Iranian civil society, in particular women activists in Iran. I just imagine it'll be worse. We do not know. I mean, there was, in the last year, this new president that has been elected, Masoud Pezeshkian, he had signaled an openness to having these dialogues and conversations with people from the Women Life Freedom Movement. He actually said this in his campaign last year when he was campaigning for president. He did mention Mahsa Amini's name in his campaign, and that was a big unprecedented move that he did as part of the as an establishment figure. Now, in the name of national security, I do not know the little progress that has been made in Iran in the last year. I was in Iran just 3 months ago. Before the U.S. strikes, before the Israeli strikes, women had no scarves on 90% of the time in the metro, in public places. But also women I saw there were more empowered to speak up for their own rights and go to court more and be more demanding of their rights, especially with the new government, the new president that has been placed. Now, with outside strikes that has happened to Iran, I do not know if there will be more progress beyond that. I can say on the surface level, I do think that the women's freedom to dress whatever they want will be more or less the same. I do think there will be more crackdowns on civil rights and civil society in general, and on newspapers, because newspapers I saw in the last year, I do read Iranian newspapers very closely, and it has gotten a lot more open and more critical of the government, whereas with the previous president and administration, it was not like that at all. Now, in the name of national security, I don't know if that will, it'll remain the same, or there will be more crackdowns even on the media. Just in the last week, we saw lots of people, influencers, activists who were arrested in Iran in the name of national security, notable political prisoners. And there has been a fresh round of executions. So I'm just seeing a direction towards more securitization of society. But I do think on the surface level, maybe the little won freedoms for women, such as freedom for hijab and stuff, those are hard-won freedoms, by the way. I think they will remain. But it's a tough road ahead. It's really unclear what will happen.
Thank you. And a follow-up question here is there any mainstream media that is adequately reporting on women's voices in Iran and what's happening for women in Iran? And I would also, add in Palestine as well, Aliyah, if you wanted to share as well. Where can people look for the truth?
I know this is a very tough question. I mean, CNN, I've been watching CNN just for, my own work purposes. And I think the only person who has really spoken out on CNN is Joy Reid. The other day, she talked about how the U.S. about the 1953 coup, how that was the root of that is the root of all of our problems today. This U.S. engineered coup. But on women, I mean, it's just very tough to find because, like I said earlier, it's just this whole remember the 2001 Afghan women need to be saved savior complex. I've been seeing that across all mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, ABC. There's not enough voices out there to adequately report what's going on the ground. And a lot of those maybe say native voices who are Iranian, they actually don't talk about the devastating effects of the war on women, right? And they tend to be more conservative, unfortunately. Now, in terms of people who you should watch, definitely, I would say Hoda Katabi. You might know her. She's a well-known Bay Area activist. She's Iranian American. I actually went to school with her in Chicago. She has a big social media presence. She adequately reports on the ground in Iran. And also another activist and journalist, his name is Alex Champs. Just type in Alex Champs Instagram on his Instagram and Twitter. He has been providing clear-eyed analysis, raw, firsthand accounts of what's going on in women in Iran, and so has Hoda. I'm just very disappointed in mainstream media because they have this women's savior complex, much like what we saw in 2001 with Afghanistan. I do not have much hope. I would say Democracy Now! Is something that I do watch. Amy Goodman has really good, brings on very good guests about Iran. I do support that. Another person I want to highlight and uplift is Negar Mortazavi. She's the host of the Iran podcast, and she does regularly feature people who are experts on human rights, women's rights in Iran, and the current political situation. So the people that I do suggest are not mainstream, but they have big social media presence and huge followings, and podcasts as well.
Aaliyah, any recommendations you have for where people can find up-to-date, accurate information?
Yeah, I mean, there are many journalists in Gaza, in Palestine, that have been, streaming in real time what is happening in Gaza. We can look at folks like Bisan Auda and others. If we're looking at mainstream media, it's also really tough. Mainstream media has been historically really awful on Palestine. And I think, similarly to Miriam, like we can look at a Democracy Now!, which has, historically had good coverage. We can also look, emerging Drop Site News has had really robust coverage on what's happening in Gaza and in Palestine. So, I'd encourage you to check out Drop Site, and I encourage you to just be following Palestinians in Gaza and across Palestine, because, Western media is not the only trustworthy source. And I can work to share with you, Tamika, a list of some folks that you can share with folks after this call. And I wanted to just touch a little bit on like the previous question that Miriam was answering in terms of, this framing around women's rights and liberation. For Palestinian women, the best thing we can do for their rights is to end the genocide and end the Israeli apartheid regime. We know more than 70% of Palestinians that were killed in the first year of the genocide were women and children. They're disproportionately impacted by this. There are over 60,000 pregnant women in Gaza right now that don't have access to medical care. Prenatal care, forget about prenatal care. They don't have access to anesthesia if they have to have a cesarean. They don't have uncontaminated food and water. They don't have food, period, for their children. There is no milk. There is no formula being allowed in. So really what we need is to end the siege on Gaza, to end the genocide, and to dismantle the Israeli occupation in Palestine and the apartheid regime. And that's the way that Palestinian women are going to get free and all Palestinians are going to get free.
Thank you so much, y'all. I want to remind folks that you will get a follow-up email. It will have some reading, some links, and I will make sure to include this recommendation. Thank you, Chris, for that question. So we'll make sure that we do that. I want to move to a next question. Let me just. I'm doing I'm on the back end with Shauna. I realize I'm like I try to do all the things. I'm probably getting in her way, trying to also do the tech side. One of the questions that it feels really important and really kind of basic is what can we do to stop the genocide and to stop the war? What can we do? What actions can people take? Everyday folks to make interventions here.
I can start. Oh, I'm sorry. I was unmuted. I hope I wasn't making background noise. Yeah, there are definitely things we can do. It can feel overwhelming and helpless, but we know that organizing works, and we know that we have power. We've seen that through the release of Mahmoud, the Palestinian international student who recently was released from detention after months being held and abducted. And after public pressure campaign and amazing work from the lawyers and legal team, he has been released and pending an immigration case. But we know that we can organize. We know that if we look, for example, at what just happened in New York City, where a candidate won, who has been vocally, standing up for Palestinian rights, who has been speaking up against U.S. complicity in apartheid. And it's not just now that Palestine is not a poison pill, but supporting Palestinian rights is a winning strategy, right? Not just, in politics, but in our grassroots organizing and with people. So I think, in terms of what you can do, there are a few things. You can call on your members of Congress to support the Block the Bombs legislation to stop weapons to Israel. We really encourage you to reach out to them and push your members of Congress on this. You can also, I think something that's really critical in this moment is just talking to people, being willing to have these conversations with your families, with your networks, with your neighbors, because we know that the majority of Americans are with us. We know that they want to stop weapons to Israel, that they want a ceasefire. And I think that we just have to be having these conversations. And then we have to be keeping our eyes open within our communities and doing research to see our institutions that may be complicit within genocide and occupation and other crimes. We do have a tool that Adala Justice Project, in partnership with Little Sis and Action Center on Race and the Economy, developed, called the Genocide Gentry, which outlines institutions, cultural institutions, universities that have ties to weapons manufacturers that have been manufacturing weapons to use against Palestinians during the genocide. I encourage you to take a look there and see what's happening in your community and look into it and organize within your workplace, organize with your neighbors, organize with, the PTA carpool, organize, we need everyone out here because we're not going to be able to stop this by ourselves. But if we organize our people, we do have a lot of power.
Thank you, Ali. Miriam, anything you want to share about what can everyday people do? What can we be doing here in the U.S. to make interventions?
Well, the war with Iran goes back to what's happening in Gaza. We can't have peace in Iran if we don't have peace in Gaza and stopping the genocide. So it just goes back to a full ceasefire, permanent ceasefire, full stop to the genocide in Gaza, justice and liberation for Gaza, because without that, we can't have peace in Iran. It is inextricably tied. Part of the reason that Israel has been empowered to bomb Iran, it was with U.S. help over the last couple of years enabling this genocide. They're feeling empowered and trigger happy with all the bombs that have been sent, that the U.S. has sent to them. So I fully encourage you all to support the Block the Bombs Act. And that's going to be one step to also blocking any more bombs for Iran as well. This is we are all tied in this struggle together. But in addition to that, like I said earlier, there is a War Powers Resolution that Senator Kaine did introduce, a War Powers Resolution a couple weeks ago. And now it's going to be up for a vote tomorrow at 6 p.m. ET. There is still time for you to make calls to Congress and demand your members of Congress to support the Kaine War Powers Resolution, which is up for a vote tomorrow. You can visit niacounCil.org/stop war with Iran. That includes our action alert, our call script, instructions on how to call your members of Congress and reach them. to make sure that that your senators support the Iran War Powers Resolution. There is a version of it in the House, and that's not going to be up for a vote I think in the next couple of weeks, so it's less urgent, but still call your House reps as well. But I think the most urgent is to call your senators during business hours tomorrow and say, please support the Iran War Powers Resolution introduced by Senator Kaine. It is important because Trump did strike Iran without congressional authorization. And this is fearsome for not just Iran, but for other countries. Now Trump can strike any country in the globe without congressional authorization, much like US did with Yemen. There was the Yemen War Powers Resolution that was introduced years back, and that was successful. It was largely successful. Now we hope we'll have another success with Iran War Powers Resolution. We want to just check President Trump's power to strike any country. This is not just about Iran. This is about, what if he wakes up tomorrow morning and decides to strike Gaza? He's very crazy like that. You cannot expect that. He may wake up one morning and decide to end it all and get peace by just bombing everybody, right? So that is a scenario that we all fear, and or empower Netanyahu to do the same more than what he has done. So yes, so block the bomb support. We fully support that, and also call your senators, demand your senators and your House reps to support the Iran War Powers Resolution, both in the House and Senate. That is niacuncil.org/stop war with Iran. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. I just want to say the nerd in me, Miriam, when you said he might just like say, I want peace and bomb everything, it gave Avengers Endgame. I just pictured Thanos. And so, yeah, anyway, pay no mind to the nerd girl. I wanted to, so we are past our time. I want to thank everybody for staying with us. I want to thank Miriam and Aaliyah. I do want to address one of the questions. We still have some questions, and I'm so sorry to everyone that we're not getting to all of them. I want to say a couple of things. One, please check your email in the next 24 hours. You will get an email with the links and the readings. We will also try to get them up on our site, like a study guide for these sessions. So please look out for that. I want to address this question from Carol. Shout out to Carol, who's been giving us thought-provoking conversation in the chat over on YouTube. But the question is, how does a study of this help us deal with the fascists currently in the government? And so I want to chime in here on this question, and I appreciate it very much because we've been thinking a lot about the pillars of fascism, right? And one of the things that we know about the pillars of fascism is that one of the central pillars of fascism is militarism, right? And so we know that the military parade that happened on June 14th, where people mobilized across the country around it, is not distinct from taking away the need for congressional authority to drop bombs in Iran, right? That we know that the militarism that we see coming out of this current administration is very much tied to the broader question of what it means to build a fascist and to bring about a fascist regime. I also want to say that I want us to be in conversation about what it is that we are spending to support Israel, and to send bombs to other countries, to bomb other countries, to have a $45 million military parade. And that simultaneously, we have disability rights activists in the Senate building getting arrested yesterday to prevent the slashing, the decimation of Medicaid and Medicare. These things are not disconnected. And also the other thing I want to say is that one thing that we have a tendency towards in this country is a collective historical amnesia, right? And so we want us to not be inside of a collective historical amnesia about the role that we have played around the globe and the impact that has had, not only on folks in other countries, but on the diaspora of those countries that live here in the United States. I was just thinking about the genocide that's happening, the conflict that's happening in the Congo right now, and the U.S. role in that by supporting the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. And so I think we have to be in conversation about the impact we have across the globe. And then on a very baseline level, to quote my spiritual ancestor, Fannie Lou Hamer, none of us are free until all of us are free. And so that's sort of that is what has guided our questions and our coming together on this topic on this evening. So once again, I want to thank Aaliyah. I want to thank Miriam. I'm trying to get back to my other screen. Oh, I'm just gonna do this. Thank y'all so much again. And then the last thing I want to say before we bring Shauna up is to come join us on Tuesday for our next Free America Study session. One of the things that I have, one of my foundations inside of the social movements where I started was organizing around policing in prisons. And what I understand from that work is that this country, even going back to the early 2000s when I started in organizing, is that this country has had more people locked up in cages than any other country around the world. And how we presume to be the ambassadors of freedom while we have masses and masses of people, disproportionately indigenous, disproportionately Black, disproportionately poor, in cages, is a question I think we have to grapple with. So next week, we'll be talking about freedom and the fight for abolition, historically and contemporary. So again, check your emails, and that is it for me. I'm passing it over back to our good love, Shauna.
Let me get off my mute quick. Sorry, Bart, about that. Just want to remind everyone to check your email. All the links from this call, as well as the other information that was stated, will be provided. Encourage you to share the video, invite friends to watch the video. We want to move into Free America Weekend, having these deep conversations in our communities and helping each other grow in this movement and learn more and do better. And that's all we have for you tonight. So we'll see you in the streets.